The year is 2014. Guardians of the Galaxy has shown the world how to do a proper needle drop. The music charts are still reeling after Lorde assassinated pop music. Ebola convinces the greater public that viral outbreaks are no big deal. And there are new video game consoles in 4% of American households. Released the year before, the PS4 and Xbox One dropped with notably poor launch lineups in the middle of one of the greatest years for gaming of all time. Knack, Dead Rising 3, and Resogun didn't really hold a candle to The Last of Us, BioShock Infinite, and GTA 5. Hey, you remember Rise? Of course not. So, 2014 was supposed to be the year the 8th generation of console gaming really got started. And, for the most part, that didn't really happen. Lots of big delays, lots of annual releases, lots of interesting trends, but not many big games. This was the year of Watch Dogs, Dark Souls 2, The Loot Cave, 2 pathetic AAA driving games, and all those Assassin's Creed Unity glitches. It was also a big year for new and developing genres. We got the first Souls-like, walking simulators started to walk through the door Gone Home opened, and the YouTube game genre came into its own under two major banners, the Broken Sims and the Forced Streams. Mobile gaming had its first major artistic blockbuster with Monument Valley, the biggest gaming Kickstarter to date released its first installment, Telltale were just beginning overproduction, and the Ouya still existed. But come year's end, there could be only one Game of the Year! And in 2014, it was pretty cut and dry. While the RPG stands lined up behind Dragon Age Inquisition, and the cool kids were rooting for Bayonetta 2, the populist choice was clear. Not topping many personal lists, but everyone's number 2, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor took the year with a resounding, yeah, I like that game. But, did it deserve all that mild praise? And does it still hold up today? I'm here to find out. Welcome to Game of the Year Revisited. In Shadow of Mordor, you play as Talion, a ranger stationed at the Black Gate, the first line of defense against the armies of Sauron, along with his wife and son, for all of 2 minutes. A band of orcs patiently waits for you to finish beating up your son in the tutorial before storming the fort and finishing the job. After sacking the gates and slaughtering his family, the strange dark leader of this strike team executes Talion in a ritual that accidentally binds him to a mysterious elven wraith. This wraith resurrects Talion, and the two of them set off to seek revenge against the forces that destroyed Talion's home. This whole sequence is shown by cutting back and forth between Talion's life before the attack and the attack itself, giving you the chance to see Talion's day-to-day and also what he has to lose. And lose it he does. As far as intros go, it's totally serviceable, but it did take me a while to click with the intercutting. Seems like less could have been more. It also doesn't give Talion's wife, according to a lore page, her name is Ioreth, I guess? Much time to present herself as a character before she gets fridged. If they had built out the starting area a bit, you might have been able to connect with Talion's family as a player, but creating a safe space wasn't one of the developers' design goals.
Put a pin in that for now, I'll get back to it.
Regardless, Talion awakens deep in hostile territory, a stranger in a strange land with nothing to do but basically become Batman. Let's take a look at the combat. At the start of the game, you have an attack, a counter, a stun, a dodge, a grab, and one seriously sweet bow and arrow. You can also pull off an ever-expanding list of specials and executions by building up your combo. Playing this game for the first time now in the year of our Lord 2022, I am blown away by just how dated the Batman combat system feels. I remember really loving the combat in Arkham Asylum when it came out. It felt dynamic and flashy and exciting, but even this expanded version feels almost brain-dead by modern action game standards. Starting out, it never felt like I was making any choices, just following a checklist. Here's a brute, time to stun him. Now I'm surrounded, better dodge away. Now I've built up my combo, time to do an execution. Just rinse and repeat until you die, everybody else dies, or more likely you get bored and run away. I think the problem is that you don't have a weapon arc, just a one-on-one attack. It feels like you're having a duel with 30 different guys and just switching between them. Luckily, as you upgrade your character, the combat becomes less and less limiting. Shadow of Mordor really does have one of the best bows I've ever seen in a game. You get a really generous bullet time effect, and for the rank and file enemies, it's one shot, one kill. Feels fantastic. And there's this truly phenomenal move called Shadow Strike. For the price of 2 arrows, you teleport to any enemy and just rip them to shreds. Your number of special moves increases the longer you play as well, giving you more versatility and increasing the number of choices you're making in combat. So while the basic combat is quite flat, after about 10 hours it goes from hit, 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 counter, execution, to hit, 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 AoE, dodge, big combo, execution, Shadow Strike to gain distance, headshot, 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 Shadow Strike back into the fray, hit, hit, flaming arrow, shoot a trap, big explosion, stun, trip, ground execution, counter, AoE, ETC, JFK, GTA, FBI, get down on the ground and spread 'em! While it still can feel a little rote, the decision density does skyrocket in a way I came to really enjoy. Unfortunately, the way you gain skills works against you in some ways. There are 3 upgrade currencies in Shadow of Mordor: XP, money, and power. You gain XP by completing missions, money by finding collectibles or completing bonus objectives mid-mission, and power from taking down orc captains. If you earn enough XP, you get a point to unlock a new ability, you spend money to increase your base stats, and as you earn power, you unlock more tiers on the tech tree. And that would all be well and good, but a depressing number of your most core abilities aren't tied to the upgrades at all, it's all through story progression. So after playing the game for 3 days, my stun had a super wide radius, but I still didn't have the AoE or the Shadow Strike, basically the 2 best moves in the game. And I don't think you can have it both ways. If it was all standard progression, then it would feel like the more time you invest, the stronger you get. And if it was all story-based, it would feel like your abilities were tied to Talion's journey. But this half measure made me feel like my progress was being halted until the game arbitrarily decided I was ready to have fun.
Psst, hey game, if it's fun, let me do it.
I think that might actually be my big problem with the Batman combat. It's a totally serviceable starting place, but on its own, it's super basic. There's very little mastery to be found at the start. Your basic attack feels like nothing. It's just the build combo button, and once you've hit that enough times, then you get to do something fun. I get that if I could just pull off the execution attacks at any point in combat, then I'd be complaining about that instead. But there's gotta be some middle ground, right? It's that the attack doesn't seem to do any damage, that's the problem. It just opens opportunities in a way that makes it feel like I have a bunch of limits on my abilities, rather than like I'm growing stronger with every hit, which I think was their intention. I don't want to have to hit the build combo button 8 times before it gets fun. I want to have fun now. But enough about the dang combat already, am I right, people? Now let's talk about world design. Woohoo! Yay! Just what we've all been waiting for! Oh my god, I can't believe it! Thank you, I do it for my fans! When the game starts, you're in Udun, henceforth to be known as Crags. Sorry folks, I've used more than enough fake words today already. Crags is a pretty shitty place to be. It's super rocky, bunch of ruins scattered around, some open fields with orc camps in them, and on either end of the map is a city. A Rio-esque favela with a slave coliseum to the east, and a full-on military fortress to the west. No agriculture to speak of, just rocks and jagged mountain ranges penning you in. You hang out for a while, kill some orcs, befriend the locals, kill some orcs, notice a pattern, kill some orcs, fight a boss, but then you leave and go to a completely different map. Shadow of Mordor does something I don't think I've seen since Assassin's Creed 2. This open world game has multiple open worlds in it. Yo, I heard you like open worlds, so I put some open worlds in this open world. This new area is called Nirn, and if it weren't for all the bloodthirsty killers roaming around, it might actually be a nice place to hang out.
By the way, from now on, we're calling Nirn Forest. Keep up.
Forest is way more verdant than Crags, with like actual grass that isn't dead and like trees and stuff. You know, a forest. There's also a pair of lovely seaside locales to enjoy. One, a fishing harbor, and the other, you guessed it, a full-on military fortress. Now this whole 2 maps thing is kind of odd. I totally get why it isn't how things are done nowadays. For one, the whole seamless map thing is way more impressive on paper. Big maps sell burgers and all that, you know? But I think I kinda liked it. I don't know, I'm conflicted. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it. On the one hand, it was pretty jarring to all of a sudden be in a whole new area after getting so used to crags. But, on the other hand, the transition came at the exact right time, because I had pretty much wrung crags dry by the time I fought the boss and triggered the world switch. But back on the first hand, couldn't they have just made the first map bigger and put the rest of the content there? Well, no, I don't think that would work as well. Not without either sacrificing freedom by artificially gating that area off anyway, or sacrificing the reveal of the new area. Because Forest really does feel completely different to Crags. By the time you get there, you've already unlocked most of your moves, so being let loose into a new map feels like a fresh start. You can almost see the invisible Act 2 Begins sign pop up when you get there, and I for one felt a major second wind. If you're going to tie mechanical progression to story progression, I think it makes sense to introduce a new environment where those new powers can really flourish. The two smaller maps also allow the developers to fill each one with even more detail and attention. Or at least they might have. Remember how I said building safe spaces wasn't on the developers' to-do list? Well, I noticed something while playing through this game, and it's kind of the whole reason I even made this video. Shadow of Mordor has got to be the most hostile open world game I've ever played. Every moment of gameplay takes place out in the open. Each map is packed to the gills with orcs and other beasties that want nothing more than to rip you limb from limb. The second you step into range of any of these baddies, you start to pull aggro. There are roving gangs of orcs just walking around the world at all times. So even if you clear out an area to catch a breather, no quiet spot stays that way for long. I mentioned that you befriend the local humans, but you only ever see their home base in cutscenes. The only passive NPCs are totally inert. There's no commerce, no companions, outside of a small handful of missions. How else would you have trailing missions? There are basically only 3 states of play: stealth, combat, or running around avoiding the former. You never feel secure, and only barely feel safe because you can pretty confidently demolish any threat to you after about 5 hours of gameplay. And the reason this stood out to me so strongly is how it affected the way I interacted with the world. Namely, that I didn't. They built all of these environments, but I never spend more than 3 seconds in any spot because as soon as I do, oh boy, here comes another crowd of dudes trying to grind my bones to make their bread. It makes the whole experience feel super mercenary. There were times, after a particularly stressful day or when I was catching up on my podcast, that it was a chill, straightforward, relaxing time, but mostly it just cheapened the story. It's hard to build an atmosphere if I'm constantly looking over my shoulder for alert pop-ups. Lastly, let's talk about superstructure. Both Crags and Forest follow a similar pattern. Talion is dropped into these new worlds with a nebulous goal in mind, usually involving the slaughter of a shocking number of orcs. There are AC-style towers, of course, which reveal all the collectibles and missions in an area. There are main missions, which usually involve the introduction of a new character, ability, or game mechanic, and there are side missions, which break down into 4 categories: combat, archery, stealth, and what in my outline are called slave missions, but which I'm going to change to liberation for obvious reasons. Most of these missions will also have a bonus objective, like use a certain move a number of times, or finish within a set time limit, stuff like that. I really like that, and I wish more games included that feature. It allows for a greater sense of mastery without punishing the underexperienced, and also jazzes up the combat by making you consider more details as you play. Then, after you've completed enough missions, it's time to take down the 5 war chiefs of each area, which you do by engaging with the much ballyhooed Nemesis system. Now, if there's one reason you've heard of Shadow of Mordor, it's because of the Nemesis system. It was a hugely innovative mechanic back in 2014. If you want to know exactly how it works, check out the Game Maker's Toolkit video about it, but in a nutshell, it turns grunt orcs into named enemies, with persistent traits and histories with the player. There are 4 tiers, 20 captains, the 5 war chiefs at the top, and a new set for each of the 2 maps. Each tier allows for more resistances and quirks until you get to the chieftains, whose stats have been fully stacked. Beyond just being menaced by them, you can also affect the power balance of the orcs by completing power struggle missions. The captains will go on expeditions or squabble amongst themselves, and you can insert yourself into them to cause a little chaos. Then, once you make it to Forest, you can start taking over the minds of captains and start creating some chaos of your own. The war chiefs also have some captains as bodyguards, who will come to their aid in combat. which can lead to fun scenarios where Talion has already replaced all the bodyguards with his minions, so when the war chief calls for aid, you just kick back and watch as they swarm him. Also a little tip here. If I've piqued your interest and you're thinking of checking out Shadow of Mordor, then I highly discourage you from downloading the GOTY content. Every time you kill a captain, you get a rune you can equip to a growing number of slots on your sword, bow, and dagger, but the GOTY content includes a bunch of super powerful runes that you get right from the start, essentially neutering the entire mechanic. The Nemesis system is pretty damn cool, and can lead to some neat emergent story moments, but that really just makes me even more bummed that Warner Brothers patented it. At the time, every critic assumed it was going to be the most ripped off mechanic the world had ever seen, and I'm pretty sad that it wasn't, because Shadow of Mordor is a really good proof of concept, but it doesn't even approach the full potential of the system. I want there to be more tiers. I want a full military hierarchy with ranks that feed into each other. I want a sergeant to have beef with a corporal, so they send one of their privates to sabotage them, thereby lowering their status with the captain. I want to find out that two chieftains are going to war and watch as their armies march across the map. The fact that one captain fills the same space as any other captain in Shadow of Mordor is such a missed opportunity. And given that Warner is one of the worst AAA publishers, it's a pretty safe assumption that we're never going to see all that promise fulfilled. After all, when was the last time you played a really great loading screen minigame? And now it's finally time to answer the big question. Did Middle-earth's Shadow of Mordor deserve to be the game of the year? Before I answer that, I should probably point out the obvious. No, I have not played every game that came out in 2014, and no, I did not play Shadow of Mordor when it first came out. I was still in college at the time, and could barely afford a TV, let alone a brand new PS4. Since then, I have played Shadow of Mordor to completion, plus time to capture footage. I'm basing my assessment of the year as a whole on critical reception, gameplay videos I've seen, how well remembered a game is, and my own memory of the state of gaming at the time. So, with all that in mind, I'm gonna say, yeah, I liked that game. It was definitely the best open world game of that year. I feel pretty confident on that front. Infamous Second Son might have been prettier, Sunset Overdrive might have had cooler traversal, and Dragon Age Inquisition almost certainly had a better story. But Shadow of Mordor has a greater aggregate goodness. Shadow of Mordor is a jack of all trades that made good with one truly brilliant mechanic. Respect it for its potential, then enjoy it for the uber-competent fantasy adventure it is. Thanks for watching.